Hey everyone, I'm Liz Merrick with the Sugar Geek Show. Today I'm going to teach you how to decorate your very first cake ever. How to bake the cake, how to trim the cake, how to decorate the cake, all the things with the cake. You don't want to miss this. Alright, so let's talk about our cake decorating tools. These are the absolute necessities to do the very basics of cake decorating, and they don't cost a lot of money, but they are worth every penny. Let's start off with a cake pan. When I first started cake decorating, I used the cake pans that you could buy at the grocery store. They're like really thick metal, or the ones at the craft store, which are very thin metal. Both of these things results in cakes that are not optimal. Either outside edges that are burned, or the cake's actually shrinking, or the sides are not straight up and down. Why would you make a cake pan where the sides are not straight up and down? So go ahead and invest in a cake pan that is a higher quality. I got this one for $6 on Amazon. It is a Fat Daddy-O's cake pan, and I have used it for my entire career after failing with those very first cake pans. So they definitely are worth the money. Another really popular brand is Magic Line, which results in a cake exterior that's a lot lighter and has less browning on it. So you wouldn't actually have to trim your cakes. I have not used these cake pans, so I can't recommend them directly from me, but there's a lot of people who do say those are really good. This is a Ginsu bread knife. This is not a cake knife per se, but it is the knife that I have been using for my entire cake decorating career. I stole it from a friend. You can use any type of serrated bread knife to trim your cakes. You don't want to try and use like a steak knife or a chef's knife. You want something that has a serrated edge, preferably long enough to go all the way through an 8-inch cake. You're also going to need a couple of offset spatulas. Offset just means that the spatula is not straight up and down. It's got this little whoop whoop. That's the professional term. Whoop whoop. Just makes it easier to smooth out your layers without getting your fingers in it. Imagine if you're trying to smooth out your layer of frosting with a straight knife. Yeah, your thumb's going in that buttercream. Offset spatulas are absolutely great. I like a small one and a medium-sized one. When I was first learning to cake decorate, I thought you were supposed to smooth the outside of your cakes with an offset spatula, and I could never, ever, ever, ever get them smooth. And I was like, what is the secret? What am I missing? I don't understand. And there were 3 things that I was missing. The right buttercream recipe, chilling my cakes before I put the final coat of buttercream on it, and a bench scraper. Yes, if you are a professional cake decorator and you ice hundreds of cakes a week, then you are not going to need a bench scraper. You're going to be a pro and you're going to know how to use an offset spatula. But I would call myself a professional cake decorator, but I don't make hundreds of cakes a week. But I still use a bench scraper. This is so easy to make the sides of your cake smooth, you'll never go back to using an offset. I got my bench scraper at the dollar store. The next thing you're going to need is a cake board. You don't absolutely have to have a cake board. You could stack your cakes directly on a plate, but then you're not going to have anything for your bench scraper to go up against when we're putting our final coat of buttercream on, so you're just going to have to guess. And we're trying to make this easy, so spend 25 cents and get yourself a cake board. You can get cake boards on Amazon or at your local cake decorating store. To decorate our cake, we're going to be using a piping tip. This is a Wilton 2F. You can use any type of star tip to make your rosettes. I just think this one's so pretty. It's got a little heart design, makes really pretty swirls. It's kind of my favorite. And I like to use disposable piping bags to put my buttercream into, but you could use a plastic Ziploc bag in a pinch. The first thing you're going to need to do is bake your cake. If you know how to bake a cake already, then you are good to go and you don't need my help. But a lot of people, the first time they decorate a cake, they've never even baked a cake. But that shouldn't stop you. So let's start easy and go with a box cake. Don't give me that look. There's nothing wrong with a box cake, but it can taste a little boxy. It's also a little bit fluffy and soft for actually like stacking. To bake it in a pan and cut it and eat it, it's fine. But if you want to stack your cake, which is what we're doing today, you're going to want to make a few adjustments to that box cake to make it taste a little bit more like scratch. So we're going to be using a white box cake mix. You can use any box cake that you like, and we're going to be adding some ingredients to make it taste even better. A little extra flour and a magical ingredient called sour cream. Sour cream is basically something that adds moisture and a little bit of tanginess to the recipe, so it tastes more like a homemade cake. Some melted butter, some water, some eggs, a little bit of almond extract. Mix up all your batter. Let me tell you about cake goop. Yes, that's an actual thing. That's what it's really called. I didn't make that up. Cake goop is some homemade pan release, and to me works even better than store-bought. Plus it's super cheap. It's just equal parts oil, flour, and vegetable shortening. Mix it up until it's smooth, put it on the shelf, and you can use it to coat the insides of your cake pans, and that cake will fall out like a butter stick on a hot day every single time. And pour it into your cake pans. I definitely recommend you're using high quality cake pans like Magic Line or Fat Daddy-O's. You can use Wilton cake pans, but just be warned, they're very lightweight and the chances of you over baking your cake is a lot higher. So now your cakes are baked. You're gonna pull your pans out of the oven and place them onto a cooling rack. Let your cakes cool for like 5 to 10 minutes until you can touch the outside of the cake pan without burning your fingers. Then flip your cakes out onto the cooling rack to let them cool even further. I will tend to flip them over again so that they're right side up, because if they sit on top of the dome, the end of the cake could potentially crack. So now we're gonna let our cakes cool, but I don't let them do this at room temperature. I actually wrap my cakes in plastic wrap and throw them into the freezer so that I can use them right away. Or if you don't eat your cakes for a couple of days, you can just leave them in the freezer. Frozen cakes actually result in a moister cake, but only if it's for less than a week. If you leave it in for like 6 months, it's gonna taste like dry sand. Never try to stack a hot cake, because then it will become a hot mess. Okay, so let's actually start building this cake. The first thing you wanna do is cut off the dome. Stacking your cake successfully really relies on your cake being straight. So in order to have a straight cake, we need to start having some straight layers. I actually use the line where the cake pan meets the actual batter as a guide to cut off the dome. Some people actually cut the domes off while they're still in the pans. That's totally okay too, if that makes it easier for you. I actually like to trim off the sides and the bottoms of my cakes as well to remove any of that brown outer coating. Totally optional, and if you do this step, then you're extra just like me. The reason for doing this is just so that when you have lighter cakes like a white cake or a funfetti cake, when you cut into it, you don't have any brown outlines around the edges, which bother people like me, but probably wouldn't bother anybody else. Before we start stacking our cake, you're gonna need a turntable. Do you have to have a turntable? No, but you don't have to decorate cakes either. Turntable is gonna make your life so much easier. You're gonna be able to put the cake on the turntable, spin it around, and get that perfect smooth layer of buttercream that you definitely want, right? My first turntable I got from Michael's, and I used my 50% off coupon, so it was really, really cheap. Not the best turntable in the world, but it definitely did the job for like a good 3 years before I invested in a really good turntable. So now let's stack our cake on top of a cake board. A cake board is a round cardboard that cake decorators use to stack and decorate their cakes. And what this does is it allows you to be able to pick up your cake and move it from like your turntable or, into the refrigerator. It's not absolutely necessary. You could just stack directly on top of like a plate or a platter, but you're not gonna have a guideline for when you're actually putting the frosting on the cake. So just keep that in mind. If you want super straight, really nice buttercream as your final result, you're gonna need a cake board. If you wanna just do like a rustic coating of buttercream, just stack right on top of the plate. So place your first layer of cake onto your cake board, and then we're gonna go with a layer of buttercream or whatever filling you wanna use. Just make sure it's not too sloppy and loose, otherwise your cake layer is gonna start wobbling around and that's not gonna be pretty. I really recommend you check out the easy buttercream recipe. It is the best buttercream recipe out there in my opinion, and no, I am not just biased. A lot of people have told me it is the best they've ever used too, okay. And the reason it's the best is because you literally just throw all the ingredients in the mixing bowl, you mix it all up until it's white and fluffy, and it's done. There's no heating, there's no cooling, there's no special techniques, and it's super, super smooth to ice your cakes. You can totally use American buttercream too if you want. Just keep in mind it's going to be a little bit stiffer. And if you're a beginner cake decorator, stiffer buttercreams are harder to get smooth. If you want to use something more than just buttercream, you can use fruit purees or even fruit curds like lemon curd or whatever. It just needs to be thick enough that it's not going to be super slippery. I actually will do a super thin layer of my strawberry puree and then take some of that puree and add it into the buttercream to make like a strawberry flavored buttercream and have both in between my cake layers. It looks really pretty when it's sliced and it adds an extra bit of yumminess to the cake. So we stacked our first layer of cake, we've got our first layer of buttercream. How do you smooth this buttercream out? Use your offset spatula to push your buttercream to the edges of the cake back and forth. Once it's covered the whole layer, then you can hold it in one position at like a 45-degree angle with the tip in the center of the buttercream and just use your turntable to spin, spin, spin and make it nice and flat. Sometimes I'll even get down low to just check to make sure that that buttercream is really level. People have a tendency to actually hold it like this and then they get a big dome in the center of their buttercream. You want to make sure that's flat. Some people prefer to bake up 2 layers of cake and then tort them in half, basically cutting them lengthwise to have more layers of cake that are thinner. I don't feel like you should do that in the beginning because like we're still on the struggle bus and we're just like learning how to do a cake. So give yourself a break. Just focus on cutting off the domes and stacking your layers of cake. So if you only have 2 layers of cake with 1 layer of buttercream, that's fine. So once you have your cake stacked and filled, we're going to do something called a crumb coat. A crumb coat is a coat of buttercream to seal in the crumbs. When you're first beginning, you definitely don't want to skip doing a crumb coat because it's actually going to make your life a lot easier. Once you chill the crumb coat, it's going to be easier to get that final coat of buttercream on there. Take a small amount of your buttercream out of the main bowl and put it into a separate bowl so you don't contaminate it with any of those cake crumbs. Take your small offset spatula and just apply a thin layer over the top of your cake and down the sides. You don't even have to smooth it out that much. And now we're gonna place this cake into the freezer until it's set up, maybe like 20 minutes or so, or you can leave it in the fridge overnight. Sometimes I do it this way because I'm baking all of my cakes, cooling them down in the freezer, and then crumb coating them so that I can decorate them the next day. Once your cake is crumb coated, it's sealed. You don't have to wrap it in plastic wrap or do anything crazy to it. Buttercream is its own natural air barrier. Cake has been crumb coated. Don't you seem fancy? Now we're gonna put the final coat of buttercream on our cake. You could either do a rustic buttercream finish where you basically just cover the whole cake in a layer of buttercream and then use the tip of your spatula or a spoon to put some like kind of rustic swirls and twists and turns on the surface. Boom, you're done. That's definitely an easy way of finishing your cake. But we're extra, so I'm gonna show you how to do the smooth buttercream. The easiest way possible, you're gonna need this magic tool called a bench scraper. So what we're gonna do is take our buttercream and put a couple of big globs right on top of the cake. Then we're gonna use our offset spatula to slowly push that buttercream back and forth, make it nice and flat and smooth and all the way to the edges, just like we did when we were filling our cake. Then we're gonna use our offset spatula as like a scoop and put some of the buttercream on the sides of the cake. Don't worry about it being pretty, just get it on there. Then we're gonna take our handy dandy bench scraper and hold it at a 45-degree angle right next to the cake and with one hand and rotate the cake with the other hand and smooth the buttercream out around the sides of the cake. It's important to take your bench scraper and just keep it flat against the turntable. Try not to tilt it, or hold it up or whatever. The whole reason we're using a bench scraper is so that you have a 90-degree angle to guide it and to keep your sides straight. So as long as you're holding it right against the turntable and dragging it slowly around, you're gonna have a very straight edge. So you might notice that as you do this, you get a few little holes and like low spots. That's the beauty of this. You know exactly where to add buttercream. Just scoop up some more buttercream, fill in those holes, smooth it out again. And just keep going until your surface is totally smooth. Buttercream always tends to build up around the outside edge when you do this. Just take your offset spatula and just very carefully scrape that buttercream back towards the center of the top of the cake and you'll be done. Look at you, professional cake decorator. Okay, so let's decorate this cake. We're not gonna do anything crazy because it is just a simple birthday cake. So what we're gonna do is just add some sprinkles and some piped rosettes. The first thing we wanna do is add our sprinkles. I'm using a sprinkles mix from Fancy Sprinkles, but you can use whatever sprinkles you want, obviously. Our cake has been chilling. It's nice and firm. You can handle it very easily. We're gonna hold it in our left hand and have our sprinkles in a bowl below us. And we're just going to scoop up little bits of sprinkles and press it onto the side of our cake to add some sprinkles around the lower part of the cake. If this is too scary for you, you can skip it. It's totally okay. To make some rosettes for the top of our cake, I'm gonna be using a piping tip called a 2F. It's actually my favorite piping tip. I think it just makes the prettiest little swirls. And we're going to fit this piping tip inside of a piping bag, cut the end off so that the tip fits through and none of the plastic is covering the end of the piping tip. I took a little bit of pink food coloring and covered some of the easy buttercream to make the rosettes, just for like a little bit of colorful interest. You can use whatever food coloring you like. I like to use AmeriColor gels because it takes very small amounts to get a really nice color. If you use the liquids that you get at the grocery store, you could end up watering down your buttercream and it doesn't result in a very bright color. Remember, your colors darken over time. So if it looks too light, check back tomorrow. It's gonna be darker. So to make my rosette symmetrical, I pipe my first one on the edge by squeezing gently until the buttercream comes out. I connect that buttercream to the top of my cake and then just do a little swirl, stop piping and pull straight up. That's how you make a rosette. You could practice making these rosettes on a piece of parchment paper until you feel comfortable making them all the same size. Scoop up that buttercream, throw it in your bowl, no waste. Then I come directly across from that rosette and pipe another one. Then I turn the whole cake by 90 degrees and pipe one in between the two rosettes from the front and in the back. Then I bet you can guess what comes next. You fill in the space in between those rosettes. This makes sure that you keep everything nicely spaced. The last thing to do is just add some more sprinkles to the top of the cake, add some candles, get that cake delivered. If you have to deliver your cake somewhere, you always want to make sure that it's covered so you don't get any dust or, whatever on it. If you have a cake box that's tall enough to fit this cake into, awesome. Most people don't. So what I like to do is take 3 skewers. I kind of make a little point them outwards. 2 pieces of plastic wrap stuck right next to each other. Just go over the top and just kind of wrap it around the base of the board. So that way it's got its own little transportation bubble. And the skewers just keep it from getting damaged. Always have your cakes refrigerated before delivery so that they're nice and firm, but you want to leave them at room temperature for at least an hour before you cut into it. Otherwise the buttercream is going to be really hard. And who likes to eat hard butter? Once you get there, you can take the plastic off, remove the skewers, and because there's sprinkles on top, you can't even see them. Yay, we just made our very first cake. Hopefully these tips and tricks have helped you a lot and encouraged you to make your first cake. If you want to learn more about cake decorating, you can check out our other recipes and tutorials on sugargeekshow.com. I'm Liz Merrick. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!